Do you ever stay up in cold sweats, wondering if this night will be your last, knowing that it's possible, and knowing that if it were to be the case, you would die without knowing a second language? Do you also have nightmares that you'll never leave the confines of your country, that you can't travel, and even if you do, you won't be able to communicate with anyone? Well, what if I told you you have the power to both learn a new language and travel? But how is that possible? Hello and welcome to The Globe Junkie, the only travel show on YouTube that's operating with a budget in the negatives, but still with an eye in the positive. Today, speaking of positives, we're going to talk about something positive, something uplifting. We like to uplift the youth. We know there's a lot of problems in the world today, and we like to help when we can, when I could gain something from it. Otherwise, fuck the youth, am I right? But alas, what's something hot in the youth these days? Why? Learning languages, no doubt. Yeah, there's probably some doubts, but whatever. Just go with it. Just go along with me. You know where this is going. So you might be thinking, why would I even need to learn a language for traveling? Like, what does that even have to do with it? Why can I not just earn money, spend it, and have my vacation? Well, the number one reason, as is usually the case, is flexing. See, you can learn a language for the culture and all that like shit, but really you just want to flex on people. You want to tell people like, I speak French, I speak Mandarin, I speak Quechua, I speak Zonka. I don't even know if that's pronounced correctly, but either way, saying you speak another language 8 times out of 10 will be a flex. Kind of depends on the language, but still, that's a reason in of itself. I know you don't have high self-esteem if you're watching my videos. This will help you, and if you I didn't mean that. Please like my videos. Give me support, god damn it. Flexing aside though, learning a language will help you in several different ways when it comes to traveling. Now, a lot of English speakers might be under the impression that because English is such an international language of business and commerce and whatever, you really don't need to learn another language. And while it's partially true, like knowing English as your native language is definitely a plus, you can probably get away with a lot of situations that other people can't, without the need to learn another language. And let me preface this by saying, you usually, if your native language is English, the need to learn another language is lessened. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't learn another language, because there's still a lot of benefits to doing it. Even if you can, if worse comes to worse, rely on English, because you'll probably, in most countries, will find at least, 1 or 2 people that speaks English to a decent amount. But then, why even bother learning another language if you just speak English? Well, first, as I mentioned, you could find 1 or 2 people. Maybe you don't. Like, depending on your location, maybe you really can't use English. So if you haven't even stocked up on any basic words or anything in the local language, you might be really fucked. And do you want to be really fucked? I don't think you do. And it's really not that difficult. Like, all you really need to do, if your main goal is just basic communication, all you really need to do is learn a few words and phrases that'll sort of help you in the day-to-day, and you'll be fine. It'll improve your experience tenfold. You'll be able to talk to people, you'll be able to get things done, ask for things, and not have to force the other person to use English if they're not comfortable, not have to search far and wide for an English speaker. Just a lot of more conveniences. So, how do you go about this? What are some resources you can use? Well, like my European ancestors, I plundered the world for resources to help you today find out how to learn some languages. Und ja, ich kann das sagen, weil ich halb Deutsch bin. Oh! So, what are these resources? Now, importantly, the things I'm going to tell you sort of apply mostly to before the trip, because I think it's important if you really want to prepare your trip to do the language studying beforehand and continue while you're there. So these resources include some pretty popular sites, places like Duolingo, probably the most famous. Excuse me, damn. Babbel, there's Pimsleur, there's Memrise, and a whole host of others. These are some of my favorites. Now, depending on the language you need to learn, there's going to be a lot more resources than others. If you're learning Spanish, French, even like Arabic, Japanese, you can probably find a whole host of sites and apps that can help you. If you want to learn like Mandinka or something, then yeah, it might be a little more difficult to find things. You might have to go more into some niche directions in the internet, read some books, do a lot of research beforehand. But either way, the internet is your friend, so you have a lot of opportunities to start learning. And I can speak from personal example because I went to Morocco in 2019, and to prepare myself for that, because I wanted to learn Arabic. So I started just on my own on the internet, finding things to figure out how to read and write in Arabic, figure out basic things. And it didn't save my life when I got there. Like, I couldn't have full-fledged conversations, but it did help a little bit just to navigate things on my own by reading, by understanding sometimes when people would speak. So I can say it really helped, when I started maybe 2 or 3 months beforehand, and it made a big difference. So I'd definitely recommend starting up on those resources as soon as possible, so that by the time you go, you have at least a little base of understanding how to read and listen and say some basic phrases, so you have basic communication right there. So, how do you choose the language to study? Now, of course, this might seem pretty obvious. You probably already have the answer, but it can be a little bit more dubious, because not every country is so cut and dry with, their official language, their most spoken languages. There's some countries, like let's say the Nordic countries, where the English proficiency is pretty high, and those languages are not really worldwide languages. Like, you use like Norwegian or Swedish in those countries. So do you even really need to learn the language? You have to ask yourself that. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is not really like a need at the end of the day, depending on where you go. Now, I just went to South Africa. South Africa has, I think, 11 official languages. And so you can think like, all right, I speak English, whatever, but depending on how thoroughly you want to interact with the culture, you might want to learn another language. But then you have to think, like, which one? Zulu, Xhosa, Afrikaans? What do you think about that click right, that Xhosa? I said Xhosa before, but I heard it's like Xhosa. I don't know if that's correct, but I was proud of myself. And like I said, traveling, learning languages, it's all about flexing, goddammit. Countries like that with many languages, will usually have regional languages that are spoken by one community or the other. So you have to also factor that in. Which parts of the country am I going to be in? Which languages will I encounter? Which people will I spend most time with? And you can factor that into which languages you want to learn. Now, depending on you, how ambitious you want to be, you could try and learn multiple languages, as much as you can take on. But I would say probably stick to like 1 at most 2, depending on, your familiarity before your background knowledge. But I'm assuming that you'd be a beginner. So if you go to like South Africa, like try Zulu or something if you're going to be in that area, just as an example. Also keep in mind, for a lot of countries, like I said South Africa, but a lot of countries in Africa, and a lot of countries that have been colonized in the past in general, there usually is a difference. Like, you can learn the colonial language. Like, let's say you go to Senegal and you want to speak French because it seems easier to you, and it's like a worldwide language. And that might be good because that's like the bigger language than, say, Wolof, one of the native languages there. But when you're down in Senegal, you might find that people maybe know a little bit of French, but not everybody speaks, to a point where you can really communicate. But if you were to learn Wolof, then you could probably do very good. So that's another thing to factor in, like the big famous language that the previous colonial overlords used may not always be the most useful in day to day. Like, if you just need to live, you just need to go to the market and buy food, like maybe learning a local smaller language like Wolof in the Senegal case I mentioned, like Zulu in the South Africa case, it can really do you a ton of good. So again, like some of my previous topics in other videos, it all depends on your trip. Like, how long do you want to stay? How much interactions are you going to be doing? How are you going to travel in the first place? So keep that all in mind and when deciding your language. Yeah. So one of the lesser sort of understood or expected benefits of learning a language, to use in a foreign country, especially like for English speakers, is the effect it has on the people, basically. See, people, if you come up to them speaking English, they'll be nice to you and everything. But for instance, if you were to go to, let's say, Nepal, and you start speaking Nepali, no one really expects you to take the time to learn it. But there's a certain gratitude that comes with the attempt. You may speak it, you may say some stuff and it sounds terrible, but at least you tried, And people I've found really appreciate that. Like, you're not really so much trying to impose like your culture and your knowledge that, okay, English is the bigger language, of course they'll learn English. It's sort of letting people, still have ownership of their place, because you're not really like saying like, oh, I'm the tourist, like speak to me in the way I understand. It's no, I'm approaching you as an equal, like blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to learn about your culture and approach you as an average person, and not as like, oh, I'm the guy that's here, I need to be helped and do things for me. More on equal footing. I hope that makes sense. Now, what about actually learning during your trip? So, to be honest, like you can just use the same resources, like, yeah, it's kind of obvious, but there's also the idea of, language schools abroad. This is one way to travel that you could do that obviously takes more commitment, takes more time and money, but it's a good way to travel. I did that, as I mentioned, learning Arabic in Morocco. I went to a language school for that, as well as French at the time. And it really was a great experience because you get the traveling experience and you get the learning experience at the same time, plus a more sort of immersion into the culture. I could learn those languages and then immediately use them because I was in that environment. So it definitely helped in both departments, but I don't expect everyone to want to do this kind of travel. So luckily, like, as long as you have the internet, you have those apps. You have like Duolingo, you have Babbel, Memrise as options, other little apps here and there. The other big thing is just to literally interact with the local people, read some things, talk to people, listen, and that will help slowly but surely. So the obstacles with this, of course, are that you can't necessarily devote as much time to the straight up learning as you could at home, because most likely, depending on how you travel, but most likely you will be on the move quite a bit. You'll be trying to see things and do things. So you can't learn exactly the same way as you could at home. You might have to learn strictly by talking to people, by listening to people, because you'll be out and about. You may not be able to sit down and take notes and make flashcards and all this stuff. So that's one obstacle. And one of the funnier obstacles is, for us English speakers, it can be hard to even try to learn another language, because most likely, if you're a beginner, you'll still have that accent, your own accent, very strong. And so, as happened to me many times, as soon as I open my mouth, people hear, oh, American, and they just respond in English. Like, I spoke German earlier. I had that little line in German, and I'm sure any Germans listening, they can hear that accent. And this happened to me many times in Germany when I'd say something like, kann ich ein Döner haben? And they respond in English, and I just like, fuck, like, damn it, I tried. I did it. I said a full sentence in German, and this is what I get. So depending on your temperament, it can be pretty annoying. It can kind of be disheartening, disappointing, but it's a minor obstacle at best. So I'd say just let it fly by, just go on, keep your head up, keep on keeping on, keep your head up, just like Tupac said, legendary linguist, spoke English and thug. God, that sounded cringe. So, in conclusion, despite these obstacles and some of the nuances I said about learning a language, it can't really be a detriment to your trip at all. Now if you learn a few words for this trip and maybe you forget them, later on, it probably will have still helped you during that trip. You may not realize it, but in hindsight, there might have been a situation where, okay, if I said that in English, maybe, this person wouldn't have done this for me or whatever, or something like that. Or if you really commit to a language, then you just have another language for life. So, as I mentioned, it's not a need, it's not really a necessity. In most cases, you can survive on English. And even if you can't, maybe, there's hand signals, there's, whatever, moods for people to read. But learning a language while traveling, is only a benefit. Like, there's no drawbacks. I think that's the main selling point of it. It takes a lot of work, and it's not immediately rewarding necessarily, but in the long term, it's really good. Like, you're just learning a life skill. You're being able to connect with so many people across the world. So do it, like, learn it. And you don't have to look back. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to second guess. You're set, man. You're good. But yeah, that's it. C'est tout. Das ist alles. I spoke a little bit on languages and traveling. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you like the globe junkie. I put a lot of effort into this, even if it doesn't seem like it, because, you know, I don't know the definition of a lot, but I did put effort, you know, time has been spent. So hopefully you like and enjoy. You can subscribe if you want. If you don't want to, don't do it. I'm not gonna fucking force you or whatever. But yeah, thanks for watching, and hope you have a nice, lovely day learning languages and taking Bangladesh is what? But yeah, so that's it. That's the video. Excuse me. Any feedback, any suggestions, you know, about things I could do better, video concepts? Like, I kind of know some things I do better. I know the setup is pretty cheap at this point, but any like subject matter, like tonal things that you think of, any constructive feedback is welcome at this stage. I'm a very new YouTuber, and I'm just kind of learning, getting my hands dirty, my feet wet, and yeah. So let me know any other topics you want covered. I'm very happy, you know, to answer. If it's travel related, it's good. If it's not travel related, you know, probably it's good depending on what it's related to. So yeah, just let's have a dialogue. Cause yeah, let's have a dialogue, because I don't want to appear wooden in these videos. I don't want to appear wooden so I don't die a log.